She walked into her own dealership dressed like an ordinary customer. No fancy suit, no entourage, just a woman curious to see how her staff really treated people. But within minutes, a salesman ignored her, a client insulted her, and security was called. What they didn't know was that the woman they tried to push out was the CEO herself, and the regret came instantly. Welcome to Brainfuel, the channel where real-life stories come alive. Stories of courage, betrayal, justice, and powerful lessons that stick with you. If you love gripping tales that keep you hooked until the very end, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our growing family. Here, every story fuels your mind and your heart. Wait, you're calling security on me? Those words would shock the entire dealership later that day. But before we get there, let's rewind to where it all began, with a decision made by a woman who had everything, yet wanted to see the truth for herself. Alicia Johnson wasn't just another executive. She was the CEO of one of the largest car dealership chains in the entire country. Her story was legendary. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood, Alicia had climbed her way up the ladder through grit, brains, and persistence. She had once been the very customer dealerships overlooked, the young black woman who people assumed couldn't afford a car, who salespeople brushed off, who often got told, maybe check the used section. She remembered those moments vividly, and she had sworn never to let her own business operate that way. But over the years, whispers started reaching her office. Customers complained about being treated unfairly. Some said salespeople pressured them into overpriced deals. Others hinted at bias. Certain clients seemed to get red carpet service, while others were barely acknowledged. Alicia's heart sank every time she heard those stories, because she had built her empire on the opposite values: respect, transparency, and fairness. She tried addressing it through memos, meetings, and training sessions. But something told her the truth wasn't reaching her. Maybe managers polished up the numbers before they landed on her desk. Maybe employees acted differently when they knew she was visiting. If she wanted the real picture, Alicia realized she needed to do something bold. That's when the idea hit her: go undercover. It wasn't the first time she disguised herself. Back in her 20s, when she was still a junior manager, she had dressed down to see how customers were treated by her colleagues. That little experiment had opened her eyes. Now, decades later, she wanted to try again, but on a much bigger stage. The plan was simple: look nothing like the boss. Instead of her tailored suits and designer handbags, she picked out a faded gray hoodie, a pair of jeans, and some old sneakers she hadn't worn in years. Her diamond earrings and signature gold watch stayed in her jewelry box. She tied her hair back into a no-nonsense bun and left her face bare of makeup. When she glanced in the mirror, even she barely recognized herself. She looked ordinary. She looked invisible. And that was exactly the point. Her assistant raised an eyebrow when Alicia explained her plan. "Ma'am, are you sure? If they recognize you—" "They won't," Alicia interrupted with a small smile. "They're too busy looking past people like this. That's the problem." That morning, Alicia drove to the dealership in a modest rental car instead of her usual luxury vehicle. She parked far from the showroom entrance and sat for a moment, her heart thumping with anticipation. She wasn't nervous about being recognized. She was nervous about what she might find. As she stepped out, she looked around at the sprawling lot. Rows of gleaming cars sparkled under the sun, lined up in perfect formation. The giant glass windows of the showroom reflected the sky, making the place look impressive, even intimidating. A few other customers were walking inside, men in suits, women in business dresses, people who looked like they came ready to spend. Alicia, by contrast, blended right into the background. When she pushed open a heavy glass door, the cool blast of air conditioning hit her face. The faint smell of new leather and car polish filled her nose. Inside, the showroom buzzed with energy. Salespeople in crisp shirts and ties moved briskly, carrying clipboards and greeting customers with firm handshakes. Phones rang at the receptionist's desk. A family laughed while checking out an SUV in the corner. The dealership looked alive, polished, and professional, exactly what Alicia wanted. But as she walked across the glossy tile floor, she noticed something. No one noticed her. She paused near a row of sedans, pretending to study the price tags. A man in a suit had walked in right after her, and within seconds, Two salesmen had rushed over to greet him, one even offering him a coffee. Alicia, meanwhile, was invisible. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. She circled around, peering into the windows of a shiny silver car, waiting for someone, anyone, to acknowledge her. Nothing. A flicker of irritation rose inside her, but she tamped it down. She needed to see how long this would go. She leaned against a nearby display and watched as a young couple walked in. Immediately, a cheerful salesman approached them, asking about their budget and needs. Alicia, standing just a few feet away, was completely ignored. Finally, after what felt like forever, a middle-aged salesman with slicked back hair glanced her way. His expression was not welcoming. It was suspicious. His eyes swept over her hoodie, her sneakers, her simple appearance. Instead of walking up with enthusiasm, he trudged over slowly, frowning as though she was an inconvenience. Can I help you with something?" he asked flatly, his tone stripped of friendliness he had shown other customers. Alicia forced a polite smile. "Yes, I'm looking for a new car. Something reliable, maybe mid-size. I just wanted to look around." The man raised his eyebrows, unimpressed. He gave her another slow once-over, then shrugged. "Well, these cars are pretty expensive. You might want to check out the used lot down the street. More affordable options there." For a moment, Alicia froze. She had expected indifference, maybe impatience, but this was outright dismissal. He hadn't asked about her budget. He hadn't asked what features she wanted. He hadn't even bothered to give her the courtesy of a proper welcome. Instead, with just one glance, he had decided she didn't belong here. Inside, her blood boiled. But on the outside, she stayed calm. She wasn't just here as a customer. She was here as a leader, an observer, someone gathering evidence. She nodded slowly, pretending to consider his words. "I'd still like to take a look," she said gently. "Maybe that sedan over there." The salesman sighed dramatically, like a man being asked to do something beneath him. He muttered something under his breath and walked off to grab the keys. Alicia watched him go, her jaw tight. In that moment, one thought ran through her mind. If this is how they treat strangers, then everything I built is at risk. And little did the salesman know, his biggest mistake was just beginning. The salesman's sighs still echoed in Alicia's ears as she stood by the sedan, waiting. He walked sluggishly toward the back office to grab the keys, as though she had just asked him for the biggest favor in the world. For a CEO who had dedicated her career to building a customer-first empire, the moment was a dagger to the heart. But Alicia held her ground. She was determined to see how far this behavior would go. While she waited, Alicia glanced around the showroom again. The place was immaculate. Floor tiles shining like mirrors, glass walls sparkling in the sunlight, polished chrome reflecting every light. A young couple laughed as their salesman showed them the trunk space of an SUV. An older gentleman in a suit sat comfortably at a desk, sipping coffee, while another salesperson explained financing options. Everyone seemed happy, busy, engaged, everyone, except her. It was a sharp reminder of the invisible line that so many customers felt but could never quite name. Those who looked worthy got the royal treatment. Those who didn't, they waited. The salesman finally returned, jingling the keys with an air of annoyance. "Here," he said, barely making eye contact. "This is the base model sedan. Not sure if it's in your price range, but..." His voice trailed off, as though finishing the sentence wasn't worth the effort. Alicia smiled politely, refusing to let his tone shake her. "Thank you," she said. She opened the driver's side door, slid inside, and ran her hands across the smooth leather steering wheel. The faint new car scent filled her nose, and for a moment, she let herself remember what it felt like years ago, by her first vehicle, nervous, excited, and hopeful. That memory only deepened the sting of how she was being treated now. The salesman leaned against the car, arms crossed. "If you're just browsing, I don't want to waste your time." "Or mine," he added. Alicia looked up. "I'm not just browsing. I came here to buy a car. But it seems like you don't believe me." He shrugged, unapologetic. "You'd be surprised how many people come in just to look, then walk out when they realize they can't afford it. I can usually tell who's serious." His words hung in the air, heavy and insulting. Alicia bit the inside of her cheek to keep from reacting. Instead, she asked calmly, "And what makes someone look serious to you?" The salesman hesitated, then smirked. "Well, let's just say, I've been in this business a long time. You get a sense." That was all Alicia needed to hear. He wasn't just being rude. He was making assumptions based entirely on appearances. And worse, he was confident enough in his prejudice to voice it. Before she could respond, the dealership doors swung open and a new customer walked in. He was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored navy suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. The receptionist smiled brightly. Two salesmen straightened their ties and moved quickly toward him, eager to shake his hand. And Alicia's salesman? He perked up, too. "Excuse me," he said, abandoning her mid-conversation. Real client just walked in. He hurried off without a second glance. Alicia sat in the sedan, frozen, her chest tightened with disbelief. She had been brushed aside. Again, like she didn't matter. She climbed out of the car slowly, her jaw clenched. From across the showroom, she watched the suited man laugh and chat with the sales team, who offered him brochures, water, even a chair. The contrast was glaring, and it made Alicia's stomach churn. This wasn't just one rude salesman. This was a culture problem, a deep, dangerous crack in the foundation of her empire. Trying to stay calm, she pretended to keep browsing. She moved toward another car, trailing her fingers across its shiny red hood. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the suited man glance at her, his brow furrowing slightly. He whispered something to the receptionist, and within seconds, the receptionist's smile faltered. She picked up the phone. Alicia's instincts buzzed. Something was off. Moments later, two uniformed security guards entered the showroom. Their presence was quiet but commanding. They scanned the room, their eyes landing on her almost immediately. One of them approached, his voice firm but polite. "Excuse me, ma'am. We've had a report that you may not be a serious buyer. We're going to have to ask you to step out of the vehicle." For a moment, Alicia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Not a serious buyer? She blinked, looking from the guard to the salesman, who stood nearby with a smug expression, and finally to the suited customer, who avoided her gaze. The message was clear. In their eyes, she didn't belong. "Is there a problem?" Alicia asked evenly, her voice calm despite the fire burning in her chest. The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Just standard protocol. We want to make sure the vehicles are safe and the showroom is secure." Alicia's lips curved into the faintest smile, not of amusement, but of resolve. She had come undercover to witness the truth. And now, the truth was standing right in front of her, undeniable. She wasn't just ignored. She wasn't just dismissed. She was being treated as a potential threat in her own dealership. The humiliation was sharp, but deeper than that was disappointment. The very values she had worked so hard to build, respect, fairness, dignity, were crumbling before her eyes. She glanced back at the sedan, at the glossy showroom, at the employees bustling around. A storm was building inside her. They thought they were dealing with an ordinary woman who couldn't possibly afford to be here. But in reality, they were about to discover that they had just disrespected the most powerful person in the building. And Alicia knew one thing for certain. The moment she revealed who she really was, this dealership would never forget it. The security guard's presence changed the entire atmosphere of the showroom. Customers glanced up from their conversations, sensing the tension. The once busy hum of chatter and laughter softened, curiosity hanging thick in the air. All eyes began to shift toward Alicia, who stood calmly near the sedan, her hands folded in front of her. The taller of the two guards spoke again, his voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, I'll need you to step away from the vehicle. We've had concerns raised that you may not have permission to be handling it." Alicia tilted her head slightly, her eyes locked on his. "Permission?" she repeated. "I walked in through the front door like everyone else. I asked the salesman for help. He gave me the keys. And now I'm being asked to step away?" The guard hesitated. He hadn't expected her calmness. Usually, people in this situation either grew defensive or stormed out. Alicia, however, was collected, almost too collected. Behind the guards, the suited customer, the one who had whispered to the receptionist, stood with his arms crossed, lips pursed in satisfaction, as though he had just done the dealership a favor. Beside him, the salesman who had dismissed Alicia earlier smirked, muttering something under his breath. Alicia caught just enough of it to hear, knew she wasn't serious. The words cut deep, but Alicia stayed composed. She wasn't here for a scene. She was here for the truth. The second guard, shorter but more assertive, gestured toward the exit. "Ma'am, if you're not a serious customer, we'll have to ask you to leave. We don't want to disturb the other clients." The irony of his words struck Alicia like lightning. Other clients? She was the CEO of this entire chain. There was no client more important than her. But they didn't know that, not yet. Instead of arguing, Alicia decided to test them further. She stepped back from the car, raising her hand slightly in mock surrender. "All right," she said calmly. "I'll step away. But before I do, I'd like to ask, what exactly makes me not a serious customer?" The guards exchanged uneasy glances. The question wasn't one they could answer without exposing the bias behind the report. They looked over at the receptionist, who fumbled with her papers, avoiding eye contact. The suited client shifted uncomfortably while the salesman blurted out, "Look, lady, we just know when someone's wasting our time, all right? You don't exactly look the part of someone who's here to buy a brand new car." A hush fell over the room. Even some of the other customers turned their heads, shocked at the bluntness of his statement. The salesman realized too late that he had said out loud what everyone else had only implied. Alicia felt a slow burn rising in her chest. She could have ended it right there, pulled out her badge, revealed her identity, and watched the entire showroom crumble in regret. But a stronger part of her wanted to let this play out just a little longer. She wanted every word, every assumption, every judgment to be laid bare in front of as many witnesses as possible. "Interesting," she said softly, her voice carrying across the room. "So, people who don't look the part don't deserve the same respect? That's how this dealership operates." The salesman shifted uncomfortably, but before he could reply, the suited customer chimed in, clearly emboldened. "Ma'am, no offense, but these cars aren't for everyone. You can't expect them to let just anyone sit in a $50,000 vehicle. Security's just doing their job." Alicia's eyes flicked toward him. "And what exactly makes you qualified to decide who's just anyone?" she asked sharply. The man faltered, his confident posture cracking. But before he could stammer out a reply, the taller guard stepped forward. "Please, ma'am, we don't want this to escalate." It was almost laughable to Alicia. Escalate? The only escalation happening was a rapid unraveling of their professionalism. Yet she kept her cool. This wasn't the moment to reveal her hand. It was the moment to let the cracks widen. Around them, whispers began to spread. A young woman tugged at her husband's sleeve, whispering she was here first. They ignored her. An older man frowned, shaking his head at the scene. Even a teenage boy near the SUV section pulled out his phone, subtly recording. The dealership had wanted to quietly push Alicia out, but instead, they had created a spectacle. The salesman, realizing he was losing control, raised his voice. "Look, we don't have time for this. If you can't afford to be here, then leave. Don't waste everyone's time." The words rang out like a gunshot. Harsh, public, damning. Alicia inhaled slowly, her patience nearly at its limit. Her disguise had done its job. She had seen the truth, not in reports, not in second-hand stories, but with her own eyes. And it was worse than she feared. This wasn't just indifference. This was open humiliation. She glanced at the two guards, who looked increasingly uneasy, caught between following orders and realizing they were part of something wrong. She saw the receptionist biting her lip, wishing she could disappear. She saw customers shifting, their faces etched with disapproval. The scene was spiraling, and Alicia knew it was time to steer it toward the moment she had been waiting for. She straightened her posture, lifting her chin. Her calm voice sliced through the noise. "You want me to leave because I don't look the part? Fine, but remember this moment, because when the truth comes out, every single person here will regret how they treated me." The room fell silent. The guards froze, unsure what to do next. The salesman scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. Yeah, sure. And who exactly are you? Some secret shopper? A small smile tugged at Alicia's lips. Something like that, she said. Inside, her decision was made. She had given them every chance. Now, the time for observation was over. The time for revelation was drawing near. And when it came, it would shake this dealership to its core. The air in the showroom felt heavy, almost electric. Customers were no longer pretending to browse. They were watching, waiting, sensing that something important was about to happen. The security guard stood stiffly, unsure of their next move. The salesman, puffed up with false confidence, smirked as though he had already won. And at the center of it all stood Alicia, calm, composed, and quietly furious. She had given them enough rope, enough time to reveal their biases, their disrespect, their carelessness. Now it was her turn. Alicia looked directly at the taller guard. Before you escort me out, there's something I think you and everyone else here should know. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the room with sharp clarity. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The receptionist froze, clutching her clipboard. The suited customer raised an eyebrow, smirking as if he expected a dramatic excuse. The salesman leaned against a desk, arms folded, his face written with smugness. Alicia reached slowly into her bag. The guards instinctively tensed, but she moved with deliberate calm. From her purse, she pulled out a sleek leather badge holder. With one fluid motion, she flipped it open, holding it high for all to see. The gold letters gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Alicia Johnson, Chief Executive Officer. Gasps rippled through the room. The receptionist's jaw dropped. A customer near the SUV muttered, "No way." The teenage boy with his phone let out a whispered, "Whoa," and zoomed in, capturing every second. Alicia's voice sliced through the stunned silence. "My name is Alicia Johnson. I am the CEO of this dealership chain. And today, I decided to go undercover to see how my customers are really treated." Her words landed like thunder. The salesman's smirk collapsed instantly. His face drained of color. The suited customer's confident stance faltered, his briefcase slipping slightly in his hand. The guards exchanged looks of sheer disbelief, suddenly realizing the magnitude of their mistake. Alicia turned slowly, making eye contact with as many people as possible. What I experienced here was not professionalism. It was not respect. It was humiliation. I walked in like any other customer, ready to buy, ready to invest. And what did I receive? Indifference, dismissal, and finally security called on me because I didn't look the part. Her tone sharpened on those last words, cutting straight to the core of the issue. The salesman stumbled forward, stuttering. "MMS Johnson, I didn't know." "That's exactly the point," Alicia snapped, her composure still intact but her anger evident. "You didn't know who I was. And because of that, you thought it was safe to treat me as less than. But let me make something very clear. Every person who walks through these doors deserves respect, whether they're wearing a suit, a hoodie, or overalls from a construction site. You don't get to decide who is worthy and who isn't." The room was silent, every word echoing in the air. The suited customer cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Johnson, I didn't mean any harm. I was just—" "You were just what?" Alicia's gaze pinned him in place. "Judging? Assuming? Whispering to the receptionist, because I didn't look like you. Let me remind you, sir, wealth doesn't always wear a suit. And character isn't defined by clothing." The man lowered his eyes, his earlier arrogance gone. Turning back to the salesman, Alicia's voice grew colder. "You saw me as a waste of time. You brushed me off, handed me keys with reluctance, and ran after someone you thought was more valuable. You openly declared that I couldn't afford these cars. Tell me, how many other customers have you treated this way when no one was watching?" The salesman's lips trembled. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. His silence spoke louder than any defense could. Alicia took a deep breath, her tone softening but her authority unshaken. "This dealership is supposed to be a place of integrity. I built this company on fairness, on service, on dignity, not on arrogance, not on discrimination, and certainly not on humiliation." Her eyes swept across the room again, landing on the guards. You were called to remove me, to treat me as if I didn't belong. And while I know you were only doing your jobs, let this be a lesson. Never assume. Ask questions. Seek the truth. Don't allow someone else's judgment to dictate your actions. The taller guard nodded stiffly, shame flickering across his face. The receptionist, who had stayed silent until now, whispered, "I'm so sorry, Ms. Johnson." Alicia gave her a small nod, then turned back to the entire staff. Her voice steadied, carrying both authority and conviction. This moment isn't just about me. It's about every single person who has walked into one of my dealerships and felt invisible. It's about every customer who's been overlooked, underestimated, or disrespected because they didn't look the part. That ends today. Gasps and murmurs rippled again. Even the customers watching seemed moved, some nodding in agreement. Then came the hammer. Alicia pointed directly at the salesman. "As for you, you're done. Today is your last day here. If you cannot treat people with basic human decency, you have no place in this company." The man's face collapsed. "Please, Ms. Johnson, I can change." "You had your chance," she interrupted firmly, "and you chose arrogance." The weight of her words hung in the air, final and absolute. Alicia let the silence linger, ensuring everyone felt the gravity of what had just happened. Then she straightened her shoulders and delivered the closing line of her revelation. "Let this day serve as a reminder to all of you. Respect is not optional. Fairness is not optional. Every customer matters. And if anyone in this company forgets that again, they won't have a future here." With that, she turned, her footsteps echoing against the tile as she headed toward the exit. But before leaving, she glanced back one last time, her eyes sharp as steel. This dealership will not be remembered for the cars it sells, but for the way it treats people. Never forget that. And with those final words, Alicia walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned employees, regretful faces, and an unforgettable lesson etched into the walls of that showroom. The dealership was frozen in stunned silence long after Alicia walked out. Her words lingered in the air like thunder after a storm, echoing in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the scene. The salesman stood trembling, sweat beading on his forehead. The suited customer avoided eye contact with anyone, wishing he could vanish into floor. The guard shifted uncomfortably, clearly regretting the part they played. The ripple effect of that moment began immediately. The receptionist quickly gathered herself, whispering to a co-worker, "Did you hear that?" The CO, the actual CO. Her voice shook with awe and guilt at the same time. A young couple sitting at a desk nodded to each other, impressed by Alicia's courage to expose the truth in front of everyone. Even the teenager who had been recording the whole event whispered to his mother, "This is going viral. People need to see this." But for Alicia, who had stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, the moment wasn't about going viral. It was about protecting the integrity of everything she had worked for. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling as the adrenaline finally settled. This wasn't just another business meeting. This was personal. Back in her car, she pulled out her phone and began making calls. The first was to her regional manager. "Clear your schedule," she said firmly. "We're holding an emergency training session. Every dealership in the chain. No excuses." The manager stammered, "Right away, Ms. Johnson. What happened?" "You'll hear it directly from me," Alicia replied. "And so will every employee in this company. It's time we remember why this business exists in the first place." News of the Undercover CEO spread to the dealership network like wildfire. Within days, employees across multiple branches were buzzing about it. Some were shocked, others embarrassed, but most were grateful. They knew this was a wake-up call, a reminder that Alicia wasn't just a figurehead sitting in a distant office. She was a leader who cared enough to walk among them, to see things with her own eyes. At the next company-wide meeting, Alicia stood at the front of a packed conference room. Managers, salespeople, and support staff filled every seat, their faces expectant and nervous. She didn't sugarcoat her words. "What happened at that dealership was unacceptable," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "It wasn't just about one rude salesman. It wasn't just about one judgmental client. It was about a culture, a mindset, that allowed those behaviors to happen. That ends now." She let her words sink in before continuing. "From this day forward, every customer who walks through our doors will be treated with dignity, regardless of how they look, what they wear, or what you assume about their finances. Respect is not a strategy. It's not a marketing tool. It's a basic human right. And if anyone in this company cannot uphold that standard, then this is not the place for you." The room erupted into nods and murmurs of agreement. Many employees felt a wave of pride. Others felt shame. But everyone understood one thing clearly. Alicia wasn't just running a business. She was setting a standard. Back at the dealership where it had all gone wrong, changes happened fast. The smug salesman who had dismissed Alicia was let go, his departure serving as a stark warning to others. New training programs were rolled out, focusing on empathy, respect, and fairness. Managers were instructed to observe not just sales numbers, but also customer interactions. Secret shopper programs were expanded, ensuring no employee could ever grow complacent again. The receptionist, who had been caught in the middle, personally apologized to Alicia during a follow-up visit. Alicia accepted the apology with grace, but reminded her gently, "Next time, listen to your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't just follow orders. Speak up." As for the suited customer, the one who had called security on Alicia, he returned days later, embarrassed and humbled. He asked to speak with her, but Alicia declined. Instead, she left him with a simple message delivered through her manager. "We don't judge you for your mistake, but let it be a lesson. Respect costs nothing. Use it freely." The story didn't stay confined to the dealership network. Thanks to the teenager's recording, the incident spread online. Within a week, the video had millions of views. Comments poured in from people around the world. The CEO is a legend. Finally, someone in power who understands what regular customers go through. I wish more bosses cared enough to do this. Respect should never depend on what someone looks like. The viral video became not just a story about a CEO. It became a story about humanity, humility, and the dangers of judging people by appearances. Months later, Alicia revisited the same dealership, this time without a disguise. Employees greeted her with warm smiles, offering assistance immediately, not because they feared her, but because they had learned to see every customer as valuable. The culture had shifted. The lesson had stuck. Walking through the showroom, Alicia paused by the same black sedan where everything had unfolded. She ran her hand along the hood and smiled faintly. That car wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a symbol of how close her company had come to losing its values, and how far they had risen since. She turned to her assistant and said softly, "You know, sometimes you have to step into the shoes of the people you serve to really understand what they face. Titles, wealth, power, none of it matters if you forget where you came from." Her assistant nodded, clearly moved. "Ma'am, I think this story has changed more than just the dealership. It's changed people." Alicia smiled. "Good, because that's what leadership is supposed to do." And so, the story of Alicia Johnson, the black CEO who went undercover and exposed the truth in her own dealership, became a powerful reminder across the business world. Leaders shared it in boardrooms. Teachers used it as a case study. Customers remembered it every time they walked into a showroom. But perhaps the greatest legacy was the simple, universal lesson Alicia had proven with her actions. Never underestimate anyone. Never judge by appearances. And never forget that the smallest act of respect can make the biggest difference. Because sometimes the person you dismiss is the one holding the power to change everything.